episode of TV Talk. Today we are going to be rapidly recapping Orphan Black. Alright, so Kara is here to get us caught up on Orphan Black before the new season starts in June. We don't know how rapid this recap is going to be, but we're just going to go for it. So Kara, are you ready?
I just have a couple things to say real quick. So, first of all, even though Orphan Black is only 4 seasons, there's only 10 episodes in every season, a lot happens in this show. And small details from previous seasons become suddenly very important in future seasons. So if I leave something out and it ends up being important, don't blame me. I tried to do this as rapidly as possible. But they do really good recaps right before every episode. So if you're interested in just starting out watching, I would probably watch all of the rest of them. But you can do it by watching the last time on parts. And then also I have left out a lot, particularly a lot of characters, including Felix, who is Sarah Manning's foster brother, and by the 3rd season, the second billed actor on the show, meaning he's a very important character. But I'm focused mostly on the clone storylines, and he was much a part of them, but not super important to everything that happens, if that makes sense.
Alright, your time begins now.
Okay, so season 1. We open with Sarah Manning, who is a drug dealer, con man sort of type person. She's also an orphan. She sees a woman who looks just like her commit suicide by jumping in front of a train. This happens within the first 5 minutes of the show. She then takes this dead woman's purse and sees that her name is Beth Childs. So she goes to her house and Sarah realizes that Beth has a lot of money in the bank. And Sarah has a daughter named Kira who's 6 or so, and she decides that she's going to impersonate Beth and take this money so that she can build a better life for her daughter Kira, who is currently being taken care of by Sarah's foster mother, Mrs. S. Then she meets Art, who is Beth's partner, because guess what? Beth is a police officer. And she finds out that Beth has been suspended because she accidentally shot a civilian named Maggie Chen. Now, while watching Sarah's own fake funeral happening, because they said that the person that jumped in front of the train was Sarah so that Sarah could take over Beth's life, she is in her car and another lookalike gets into her car named Katya, and she is killed by a sniper. End of episode 1. That's the most detailed in any episode. So then Sarah meets soccer mom Allison Hendricks and evolutionary development grad student Cassima Niehaus, who both look very much like her, and inform her that she is one of many clones and that somebody is killing them all off. So Sarah as Beth and Art are assigned to figure out what happened to Katya, and they chase down the killer only to realize that it's another clone from Ukraine named Helena, and she runs away from them. So then the police believe that Helena is part of a fundamentalist Christian group called the Proletheans. And Helena lures Sarah to Maggie Chen's apartment, the civilian she killed, where it's revealed that Maggie Chen was also a part of the Proletheans and that Beth actually killed her to protect the other clones. This comes back later. I swear all these things are important. Then the clones begin to suspect that the people closest to them in their lives are monitoring them. Allison is being monitored by her husband Donnie, and Sarah thinks that she's being monitored by Beth's boyfriend Paul. So then there's a confrontation between Sarah and Paul where it's revealed that Beth is actually dead, and that Paul doesn't actually really know why he's watching Beth, but then he figures out that they're clones. At school, Cassima becomes friends with another student named Delphine, and they attend a lecture by Dr. Aldous Leakey, who is in charge of the Dyad Institute, and he's talking about neolution, which is technologically altering humans. And then Cassima and Delphine sleep together, and Dr. Leakey is like, hey Delphine, you should spy on / become the monitor of Cassima, and she does. And then Allison goes home and walks into an intervention that's being held by her husband and her next door neighbor / best friend named Ainsley, because she has been acting very paranoid recently. So then Art finds some CCTV footage of Beth's suicide and realizes that Sarah is not Beth. And Mrs. S, the foster mother, has contacted her underground contacts in Europe and brought in Amelia, who is Sarah's surrogate mother who actually gave birth to her, but she reveals that she gave birth to 2 children, and Helena and Sarah are actually twins. So then Helena finds Amelia and stabs her to death, so then Sarah shoots Helena, and presumably that she is dead. Then the clones all meet Dr. Leakey and Rachel Duncan, who is a self-aware clone who is very high up in Dyad, and they try to get the clones to sign this contract for protection, but then Cosima realizes that the clones are actually intellectual property of Dyad, so the clones don't sign it. And also Allison confronts Ainsley in her kitchen, and her scarf gets stuck in the garbage disposal, and she starts choking, and Allison lets her die. So season 2 starts off with Sarah being chased by 2 men in a diner. One of them is named Mark, and then she gets away. He'll come up again. Allison has become addicted to pills and has stepped up to take the leading role in a community theater musical because Ainsley vacated the role because she's dead. And Art finds out that the people who were chasing Sarah in the diner were Proletheans, and this group that raised Helena. So Mrs. S then does some badass things, and she protects Kira and Sarah, and she murders some Proletheans and stuff. And then Cosima starts working for Dyad and studying the clones so that she can come up with a cure for a respiratory illness that a bunch of them have gotten, including Cosima and Katya. And turns out Helena's alive, and she gets taken by a bunch of Proletheans. And Allison starts drinking because of the guilt of Ainsley's death, and finds out that it was actually her husband who was monitoring her all along. And during a performance of the musical, she falls off the stage and then wakes up in rehab. Meanwhile, Helena is at a ranch with with all these Proletheans, and they're doing all these weird religious rituals, and also they took her eggs, fertilized them, and then put them back inside of her. So now she's pregnant. And then we meet Cal, who is Kira's father, and turns out to be the most helpful character, and takes Kira and keeps her safe for a while. A lot happens, but basically Helena ends up escaping from the Proletheans and then comes and saves Sarah after she got captured by one of Rachel's minions, and so now Sarah and Helena are friends, even though Sarah shot Helena. And then Paul becomes Rachel's main minion and monitor. And in the lab, Cosima and Delphine realize that the respiratory issues are probably linked to the clones' infertility, and the clones are infertile, by the way, except for Sarah and Helena. And they start looking for treatments. So Sarah finds out that Ethan and Susan Duncan, who are Rachel's parents, are actually the founders of their clone project, and Helena tried to find, her and Helena try to find out more information about them, but they find out that they both died in a fire that also destroyed the original clone genome that could help save Cosima. But turns out Ethan's still alive, and Mrs. S found him, and they realized that Leakey was behind the fire that killed Susan and the original genome. So Rachel fires him and implies that he's going to be killed. But guess what? As he's leaving Dyad, Allison's husband, Donnie, confronts him in a car and accidentally shoots him and kills him, and then Allison and Dyad bury him in their garage. Another detail that will be coming back. Another clone, a transgender one, who contacts Beth, is there to deliver a message from his dead monitor, saying, "Tell Beth to keep the faith. Paul's like me. He's on it. He's a ghost." And then the reason I mention this is because this clone found out he was a clone and then left and hasn't come back since, but I imagine he will be coming back in the final season. Then Ethan gives Kira a copy of a book called The Island of Dr. Moreau that has a bunch of writing in the margins, and he also tells Rachel that the clones were meant to be infertile and that Sarah was actually a fluke. And he attempts to help Cosima find a cure because her illness is getting worse. Then Delphine is promoted to Dr. Leakey's job of being in charge of all these clones, which are called Project Leda. And Rachel abducts Kira while she's donating stem cells to help Cosima with Cosima's treatments. And so Sarah turns herself into the Dyad because she thinks that it'll save Kira, but then Ethan kills himself to stop Rachel from getting more information, and Cosima and her lab assistant Scott create a weapon out of a fire extinguisher that stabs a pencil into Rachel's eye, and then Sarah and Kira escape Dyad. And then Helena is captured by the military, which is arranged by Paul and Mrs. S in exchange for Sarah's release. And a mystery Dyad executive, who's like in one episode and then gets killed, reveals that to Sarah that there's actually a younger Leda clone named Charlotte, who's a kid, and the military was in charge of a male version of all the clones called Project Castor, who all look like Mark, the guy that attacked her in the diner. And that, that's the end of season 3, or season 2, I'm sorry. We're starting season 3 now. Woo! getting better, but her and Delphine break up as Delphine takes over Leaky's job. And Delphine shows Sarah a video of two Castor clones named Rudy and Seth trying to abduct Crystal, who's another Lita clone who works in a nail salon. Now Sarah realizes that Mrs. S gave Helena to the military and gets all pissed off. And a new dyad exec named Ferdinand comes into the picture, and it's revealed that he actually killed 6 self-aware clones in a mission called Helsinki, and is planning to kill Allison and Cosima and Sarah. But Sarah stops him via torture and dressing up as other clones and stuff, like always happens on this show. And then Rudy and Seth try to find tissue samples from the original Castor clone because they have a degenerative disorder, which ends up killing Seth, and it's killing all of them, similar to how all the Lita clones are being killed. And Cal takes Kira to Iceland to help protect her. And then Sarah tries to find Helena, who's imprisoned in a military facility that is led by Dr. Virginia Cody. And Allison decides to run for school trustee, so Allison and Donnie start dealing prescription drugs to try to win over the votes of suburban moms. And Cosima does some tests on Seth's body, his dead body, and figures out that the Castor and Lita clones are actually biological siblings. And then Sarah is captured by Mark and Rudy and taken to an army base where she is imprisoned next to Helena. And then the two of them try to escape, but Helena gets out and leaves Sarah behind. Paul is also there, and he's all sad because they weren't supposed to take Sarah or whatever. He's in love with her. And then a lot of stuff is happening at the same time, but basically Paul and Cosima both realize that the Castor clone's defect is sexually transmitted and makes women that they sleep with infertile, and they're using this as a weapon. And Paul sees Virginia giving Sarah a bunch of Rudy's blood to try to make her infertile, but it doesn't work. And then Paul helps Sarah escape, but in the process he gets stabbed, and then he releases a grenade to destroy all of the research that's been going on the base, and kills himself in the process. The only honorable thing he did in the entire show. And then Sarah and Helena are reunited because Helena actually came back to try to get Sarah. And Allison and Donnie decide to buy her mother's soap shop to use as a front for their drug dealing business. And the whole time Rachel has been rehabilitating from this eye brain damage thing from the pencil going in her eye. And Scott realizes that Rachel knows how to decode Ethan's notes in the margins of the book that he had given to Kira, which presumably has information about the original genome and could help save the clones' lives. So Rachel starts translating the book, but she doesn't get all the way through because some of her people take her away and give her a prosthetic eye. But from what she translated, they think that the original clone is in London. And so they go to London, and they end up finding Mrs. S's mom, Kendall, who is actually the original clone for both Lita and Castor. And Allison and Donnie then have some issues with their drug supplier, and Helena ends up murdering a bunch of people in a warehouse. And so Sarah takes Kendall, the original clone, back to Canada, which is where this takes place, in case you were wondering. And they lure Virginia into a trap, and Ferdinand captures her, and then Helena kills Rudy in Allison and Donnie's garage, so second body in there. And then Delphine figures out that the Neolutionists have been running Lita and Castor all along, and so she tries to get out, but then she is shot by an unknown figure, presumably dead. Rachel is in a house where she is reunited with her mother. Turns out she's not dead either, and the young Lita clone Charlotte is there too. And then Sarah and Mrs. S take Kendall to Iceland with Kira's dad, and they are reunited and safe for the time being until season 4, which is this last season. So the first episode is actually really interesting. It takes place mostly in flashbacks. But basically, MK, who's another Lita clone that we have just been introduced to, sees 2 paramedics burying a body in the woods and calls Beth to investigate, the real Beth who was alive, and discovers that the man's cheek has been cut off and that he was a Neolutionist. And so Art and Beth sleep together, which is weird, and then she goes to investigate a new crime scene and realizes a cop that she works with, Detective Duco, is actually behind the Neolution killings, and then right after that she accidentally kills Maggie Chen, so it's kind of going full circle. And then in the present, MK warns Sarah that the Neolutionists are coming, and her, Mrs. S, Kendall, and Kira all leave Iceland. And Sarah sees a video of a Neolution follower getting an operation on his cheek, and a bot, this worm thing, is implanted in his cheek and ruptures and kills him. And then Sarah realizes that she has one of these bots in her own cheek, and Allison and Donnie dig up Dr. Leakey's body under their garage to get the bot that was implanted in him so that Cosima can study it. and they realize that these bots are performing gene editing therapy to change the DNA of the person that it's in. Then there's like some sketchy stuff happening at this fertility clinic, so they go in to investigate and find out there's a special fertility corporation called Brightborn that is genetically changing human embryos, and Cosima sees a Brightborn baby delivered with severe abnormalities. It is then revealed that MK is a clone that survived the Helsinki event that was orchestrated by Ferdinand a while back and wants revenge, so she takes all of his money and runs away. And then Cosima and Sarah decide to share Kendall's genome with Brightborn to find a cure without Kendall's permission. And Cosima and Brightborn manage to remove Sarah's bot, but Kendall gets kidnapped by Detective Duco and killed to ruin their chance for a cure, as instructed by Brightborn. Brightborn also wipes out all of Cosima and Scott's research, because guess what? They're trying to kill all the clones. Cosima finds out that Crystal saw Delphine being carried away alive after she was shot. And then Rachel starts hallucinating swans like the animal, in her fake eye. And she finds out that they're on the island that was founded by the founder of Neolution, named Dr. Westmoreland, which is going to be important next season, I'm sure. MK reveals that she tracked down Rachel's location, and Cosima teams up with Sarah Duncan to actually figure out a cure by making an embryonic stem cell by combining the Leda eggs and castor sperm. And then Brightborn plans to take out all the Leda clones and implant bots into millions under the guise of gene therapy. Mrs. S then shoots Detective Duco for killing her mom. Rachel tricks Brightborn's CEO into saying that they euthanized the deformed newborns on camera, and then they play it on all the major news channels, which ruins Brightborn's chance of more bot implantation and ensures that Rachel can take over Neolution like she wanted all the time. Cosima discovers a cure, but is then captured by Susan Duncan, and then Sarah flies to the island to save Cosima. And Sarah and Cosima and Charlotte all flee, but they're all dying or injured. And then Sarah discovers that Kira and Mrs. S were taken by Ferdinand, who has taken over Neolution for Rachel. And then it ends with Rachel preparing to meet Dr. Westmoreland, who is apparently still alive.
Wow. 15 minutes and 40 seconds. It's still a lot shorter than the Grey's Anatomy recap, so we're
Orphan
good on
Black
that
is
one.
only 4 seasons.
But there is a lot that happens in Orphan Black, and as somebody who has watched the show, I have to say that it was very thorough and very helpful, because I didn't remember half of those things.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of details that will be coming back in the last season, but I think I have sort of touched on most of the things that'll be important, hopefully.
So Orphan Black, the final season, I believe, is June 5th on
June 10th.
June 10th. June 10th.
BBC
Listen to Kara,
America,
not
yeah.
me. BBC America, June 10th. Make sure to check it out. Thank you so much for doing this. This is your, last William and Mary TV episode?
Other than the things that we're filming tonight.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, WMTV 1693, and check out all of our social medias. Thank you for watching.